Terry, for the first time in 5 years, the 4th of July is in the middle of the work week, so fewer Americans may travel this year. But as Mark Martin reports, millions still hit the road, and lower gas prices made the trip easier.
AAA predicts more than 42 million Americans will travel 50 miles or more this 4th of July. That's a nearly 5% increase over last year. One reason? Falling gas prices. The current national average for a gallon of regular is $3.33. That's down nearly 22 cents from a year ago. AAA reports 84% of all holiday travelers will be driving. Even so, traffic might not be as bad as in years past.
It's more staggered, in other words, and it's not going to be this big, huge crush like we see like for a usual 3-day weekend.
While the roads may be clear, expect a lot of foot traffic if you're headed for the beach.
Just because it gets really crowded with everyone coming into the coastal communities, like 4th of July is really popular around here.
I think the biggest impact will be going towards the beaches, and a lot of the activities and festivities happen down in the beach community.
The savings on gas won't translate into more holiday spending. Americans are expected to spend only about $749 per person on their trips, down 7% from last year. Travel experts say people want to get away with their families, but they don't want to break the bank. If you decide not to hit the road and instead stay in the office, chances are you won't get much done. One study shows workplace productivity falls by 20% in the summer. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, even though Americans are celebrating Independence Day, it's sometimes easy to forget the depths of a word like liberty. Men fought and died so America could be free. But for them, liberty was intertwined with the God of liberty. Paul Strand reports on how crucial this God of liberty was to America's revolution.
Sad fact of history. Christians fleeing the old world to practice their own religion often turned right around and persecuted fellow Americans from other denominations. They wanted theirs to be the recognized state church, ruling over all others. But watching that persecution outraged future leaders like James Madison.
As late as the early 1770s, you have Baptist preachers who are being thrown in jail for illegal preaching in Virginia. And James Madison, as a young man, watches this going on, and he thinks it's despicable.
Thomas Kidd writes, in God of Liberty, these future revolutionary leaders began to see religious liberty, indeed liberty itself, as a basic God-given right for all, and defending it as a crucial duty to the God who created them all and created them free.
People like Jefferson and Madison make common cause with these evangelicals, especially Baptists, on the issue of religious liberty.
Then when England began to push the colonies around, the colonists worried it would first take their economic freedom, but then more importantly, their religious freedom. They'd demonstrate against taxes, but for liberty, they'd be willing to fight and die in a revolution. Rod Gregg, author of Forged in Faith.
Taxes were sort of the spark that ignited it, but the issue was far greater than whether you had to pay more taxes or not.
They believed that the attack on their economic rights was actually a precursor to an attack on their religious rights. And they believed that religious liberty was the most precious liberty, and that if they didn't act in 1775 and 76, that ultimately they would lose all their rights.
Americans at the time believed in higher law, that God's law was over everything, over man's law.
Gregg says Christian Americans believed England was going against God and his law in crushing their God-given rights.
They believed that their first obligation was to God, and that if a government tried to intrude on that, that gave them the right, the liberty to revolt against that government.
In fact, they saw it as their duty to God.
Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. This was a favorite motto of Jefferson and also of many evangelicals.
The men who fought the battles of the Revolution and endured harsh winters in places like here in Valley Forge weren't just fighting for their rights and for concepts like freedom and liberty. They were fighting for someone. Of course, their fellow Americans, but also the God of liberty. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Valley Forge, Pennsylvania.
Good reminder. Thanks, Paul. Well, actor Andy Griffith's widow says she can't imagine life without her husband, who died Tuesday at age 86. But she says he was, quote, a person of incredibly strong Christian faith and was prepared for the day he would be called home to his Lord. Griffith sang and played trombone in church as a child, and he won a Grammy for an album of gospel hymns in 1997. He actually considered a career in the ministry before becoming an actor and eventually starred on the legendary Andy Griffith Show. I spoke with actress Nancy Stafford, who worked with him on his 80s TV series, Matlock.
His faith just deepened day by day, and it was so wonderful to be around. And you know that he did those hymn albums after we finished shooting Matlock. He recorded a couple of wonderful albums of hymns, but on the set, he'd wander around the set and he'd come into the makeup trailer and he'd either be whistling or humming or singing some of the great old hymns.
And you can hear my entire interview with Nancy Stafford on cbnnews.com. Authorities are stepping up security in major U.S. cities over the 4th of July holiday. No specific terror threats have been identified, but officials believe al-Qaeda continues to plot against the U.S. and is only waiting for a target. Cities like New York, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia are on high alert. U.S. Catholics complete a 2-week series of events aimed at protecting religious liberty today. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops called for the Fortnight for Freedom in response to a White House mandate, one that requires employers to purchase birth control for its employees regardless of their religious beliefs. 2 weeks of prayer, education, and advocacy end at noon when Catholic churches across the country ring their bells. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.